Since moving here, there's been a lot of things that have been interesting to learn, have opposite meanings, even though we both speak English. Like public school here means really expensive private school, and in the States, public school is government funded. Everyone can go in the name public school. But one thing that has been very interesting to learn is that your guys' private insurance is nothing like what private insurance is in the States. And I wanted to do a follow up to my NHS video that you might have seen where I discuss going to the A&E, which for my Americans out there is like the ENR in the States. Um, Going with my husband for when he had chest pains and seeing the NHS in action as an observer. I wanted to go over with what he went through and what that potential bill could look like in the States. Also, I wanted to discuss a few stories that would never happened here and became so normal to see in the headlines in America. Now, the first thing I wanted to go into was giving you what the rate would have been had we gone to the ER in the States, A&E. I'm going to use them interchangeably. Now, I pulled some numbers up on my computer, so I want to make sure I have these right when I read them to you. If you don't know, last winter ended up going to the ER here with my husband because he was having a difficult time breathing and was afraid it could be a heart attack. Turns out it was not. It was actually due to black mold in the place, but that's a whole other story. Never had that feeling before, so we went to the A&E. Now, we did take an Uber. We didn't take an ambulance because as Americans, we're just conditioned to be terrified of taking an ambulance, which starts us off at the beginning of the bill, which could be anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. Again, this is all going to be average prices depending on your insurance and how much your insurance would cover. You never know if it's going to be 40%, 60%, all varies. But these are just the average cost without insurance. So the ER visit would be $1,000 to $3,000 for a facility fee, or basically a fee for walking in the door. Then the first test, say an EKG, that would be $150 to $500. A basic blood work panel would be $200 to $800, which was wild because they did a basic blood work panel in the A&E here, and I was really surprised because you don't just by default get a blood work panel in the States when you go into the ER, but it seems like that is the standard here. But back to the list. So if they want to do a cardiac enzyme test, which is where they test your blood work to see if you have the enzymes that get released after a heart attack, that would be $300 to $1,000. If they order a chest x-ray, you're looking at $250 to $500. And if they order a CT scan, you're looking at $1,500 to $4,000. And if they keep you for observation, say 12 hours overnight, which is possible, you're looking at another $2,000 to $5,000. So once you're check monitored and they send you home, and they find nothing, by the way, this is if the outcome is you didn't have a heart attack, it was say a panic attack. You get sent home with a bill that's roughly $4,000 to $8,000 for taking yourself to the ER. Now, if they confirm that you actually did have a heart attack, you will have a second one because the bill, when it comes in the mail, will be very shocking. So if they do a catheter in your heart or a possible stent, you're looking at $25,000 to $55,000. And if they keep you in the hospital on average for 3 to 5 days, which if they do a procedure like that, they typically are going to keep you for observation to make sure you're okay, you're looking at another $20,000 to $40,000. So you can see how quickly and easily your bill can end up into $60,000 to $100,000 for simply going to the ER for the same thing that we went to here, and which again is very shocking to just see healthcare as something that you should be proactive about, and how many Americans actually live and make choices in their life based on this just chip and terrified feeling of ever being sick, because being sick isn't the scary part. It truly is the bill. And it also made me think of some headlines I saw this week that would just simply not exist here. And I don't know if you saw that James Vanderbeek, the actor that played Dawson in Dawson's Creek, He has stage 3, I believe, colorectal cancer, and he is auctioning off memorabilia from when he was in Dawson's Creek and various other movies to be able to pay for his cancer treatments. And I think a lot of people are wondering, one, how come he doesn't have insurance? Isn't he in SAG? And I'll explain that. And then also, isn't he rich? He's a famous actor. Why can't he just pay out of pocket for his cancer treatments? So the thing in the States is if you don't have insurance, but you can pay out of pocket in full, a lot of hospitals still will not accept that as a payment. They require you to have some form of insurance to be treated. The only obligation to treat you is once you're in the emergency room, not for. And so that is why James Vanderbeek could be able to pay out of pocket for care and still be unable to actually access that care. And the other thing goes back to SAG. So SAG is a union, and like many unions, you have to complete so many union hours in a year to be able to access your union benefits. And because he's been struggling with cancer, he's clearly been able to fulfill those hours in a 12-month period or whatever the time limit is, which means he loses access to that insurance. The other headline was about Serena Williams, the tennis player. When asked why she wanted to come back to the professional sport at 45, she simply said insurance. She was on Cobra, which I explained in my other video, and I'll link down below. And Cobra is an extremely expensive option as kind of a catch all in between employers. But since she was not going to clearly go back to that same job, she wasn't going to be able to access that same level of insurance. So she had to go back into the sport to be able to have insurance that covered the care that she needed. And again, it goes back into that just because you can pay out of pocket doesn't mean you actually are able to access that care. Now, this actually happened to one of my friends as well. Her father was in hospice. He was a professor. He actually taught at the university here in Birmingham before moving to America and having his family. He had insurance and he was in hospice for end of life care due to cancer as well. And he was unable to swallow pills anymore. And his insurance would not cover a liquid IV bag of ibuprofen, which is similar to paracetamol, just a light pain relief in his end of life care. Now, his insurance denied IV bags would only cover pills, but he can't swallow. Now, you can appeal these decisions with your insurance, but that takes months. And when someone's in hospice care, clearly they don't really have months to go through that process of an appeal. Eve offered to buy her father a liquid IV bag at the hospital because he can't swallow and she doesn't want him to be in pain. But they inform her, even though she's able to pay out of pocket for this, they aren't able to acquiesce that request, that everything has to be improved by the insurance to be on. Because if they're going to approve that by the insurance or not approve that, then they could argue, well, this medication interfered with this because we didn't approve that medication. So to just negate any risk of any potential lawsuits over any imaginary fears, you have to deal with healthcare that literally makes your end of life even worse. So he was unable to get liquid IV of painkillers and had to try to swallow pills, which he could not do, and he just had excruciating pain. And that kind of lack of logic would never happen in the healthcare here. If someone can't swallow a pill, they wouldn't be denied an IV bag simply because insurance doesn't cover it. It's just logic. I also think of my friend Josh that I've known since I was 5 years old and how something like the NHS, our universal healthcare, would change his life. He was born with several different autoimmune disorders and was told he wouldn't live past 25, one of his autoimmune disorders being sickle cell anemia. And because his mother made under a certain amount of money when he was under the age of 18, he was able to have government subsidized health care to be able to get blood transfusions and his health care kept up. Because if you know anything about autoimmune disorders, they don't exactly go away. They're something you have to learn to manage. So once he turned 18, he obviously had no more access to that healthcare subsidy that he had as a minor, but his job didn't offer insurance and he doesn't make enough to pay for insurance out of pocket. So he is left to having no access to healthcare unless he is in need of an emergency that sends him to the emergency room. Now, luckily, he made it well past 25. He's still alive. He's almost 40, But due to not being able to afford healthcare and having no access to subsidy because he makes not enough to get completely free healthcare or assisted healthcare, he makes just over the line to barely support himself, but not enough to buy insurance. So he's left in limbo. And anytime he needs a blood transfusion for his sickle cell anemia, he has to wait until he's so bad off that he has to go straight to the emergency room. Now, I don't know how that is efficient. I don't know how that, and not efficient for him. He's doing the best that he can. But I don't know how it can be argued that that form of healthcare is efficiency, because even if you just look at days missed from work without scheduling, all these things that can affect a business, allowing people to be able to take sick days or go get healthcare or offering them healthcare would negate a lot of downtime. And there's another thing about over here that I've been really shocked to learn too is sick days. So you might be surprised to learn in the States, only 25% of employees even have sick days. And the average amount of sick days an employee is given in the States is only 6 to 9 days. Over here, you have 28 days of holiday you can take off a year. Like, it blows my mind. And in the States, even though you have these very limited sick days, some employers will require you to have a doctor's note to prove that you were actually sick. And if you don't have insurance, that doctor's note can be $200. And if you do have insurance, you're still looking at a copay of $80. So, right there, even though you're missing work and you won't be paid for being sick, because that is another thing, sick days don't necessarily have to be paid sick days. You can take off from work and then suddenly you have to have $200 to prove that you're sick when you're clearly sick. And if you're sick, the last thing you want to deal with is trying to go get a note or leave the house or do anything other than rest. But that's the counterintuitive healthcare system of the States. That's my observation from the outside. Have you ever used American healthcare? Have you ever been in America and had an accident and have to use it? Do you typically get travel insurance when you go? I know that's something that people can do. Let me know in the comments below. And if you like hearing comparisons and horror stories from the States and watch me explore delicious pubs and go on walking tours, please like and subscribe and let me know those answers in the comments below. See you in the next one.